Välkommen allesammans! Women in the Viking Age is a question that you all have asked me a lot about, and it's a huge subject, too big for one video, so I'm going to be doing a series on all the aspects of females in the Viking Age. And I'm happy to do this because there are so many people just speaking about this, and even movies and TV shows being made. Unfortunately, most of it is just reflecting their own personal views instead of actual historical facts. Anyways, I'm always happy to clear up misconceptions about things like these. So this first video is going to be about women and the relationship to violence in the Viking Age. The big misconception is that women living in the Viking Age were just a bunch of butch tomboys going out and raping and pillaging with the men, just going out and living that promiscuous lifestyle, being passed around by all the men like a blow-up doll. And the old famous story, of course, that the Vikings raped and murdered everything with a hole that they found wherever they went. And this is the complete opposite of the reality. And instead of just spreading the same lies and shitting all over our native culture like they've been doing for 1,000 years now, I'm just going to give you guys some of what the sources say, and you can decide for yourself what you want to believe. And you will see that women in the Viking Age were respected, valued, and protected, and they were actually kept as far away as possible from harm. Just like women today in Scandinavia, just like women in Scandinavia have always been. So first fun fact, we have actually 0 records from the Sagas or other foreign chronicles from the time that women participated in battle with men. We have a couple records of women, defending themselves on their farm or household. We also have 1 to 2 records of women coming to battle as kind of support, either tactical or even spiritual support with magic. But these examples actually come from a lot before the Viking Age, actually. The Viking Age absolutely didn't happen. Also a fun fact, we have not 0, but almost 0 records of rape in the Viking Age. Rape was not something that was done, and it was one of the most dishonorable things that only the most wicked people would do. And a lot of people don't want to believe these things. They prefer to get their historical information from Vikings TV series, but I'm gonna go over a few of the sources right now. Here are a few examples. One comes in Egil's saga. King Harald Fairhair, actually, and a few dozen of his men were after a man named Thorolf, who had betrayed him. So he was hiding up in a feasting hall with the people of his village, and the king and his men surrounded the feast hall and shouted to the inside to have the slaves, elderly, the children, and women leave the hall before the men started fighting. Neither side of warriors did a damn thing until these innocents got far away to safety. So this is something we see a lot in the sagas. Women, elderly, slaves, children, they were often referred to as blöt. Directly translated means soft, and harming someone who was referred to as blöt was extremely dishonorable. This was a time in history where honor and reputation actually meant something, unlike today, so this was a very, very rare occurrence. Another example comes in Vatnsdæla saga, and here there was a quarrel between the families of Thorkel and Hermund. So they were at the Althing in Iceland, and the men were about to have a deadly fight. Hermund's mother was there along with some other girls from the family, so she went up to Thorkel in hopes of protecting her son from death and fighting, trying to convince him to not attack her son. And very politely, Thorkel says, "Things have come to pass that we didn't expect," and he politely asks her and the other women to return to your tent so you don't have to see your son get killed. And they waited until the woman got away to safety before they started fighting. So this is another common theme that comes up in all the sagas, making sure that they get to safety before any sort of risky or violent activity happens. Another comes in the saga of Ravnkel Freyrsgodi, and here there was a band of 60 men going to attack a very powerful chieftain called Ravnkel. They went to his homestead and stormed the building, and before they did anything, they rushed the women and children out of the building. In this case, they actually did some very cruel torture to Ravnkel and even his slaves, but the women and children were not harmed. They were rushed out before any of the dangerous stuff happened. Another example, in Laxdala Saga, there were 4 brothers called the Olafsons, and they were going to attack a rich nobleman named Bulli on his homestead. And their mother actually wanted to come with them to make sure they got the job done. Like, she was the one pushing them to go get revenge on this Bulli. And they said, no, this is no errand for a woman, it will be dangerous. The story continues. They go to Bulli's homestead in quite a cowardly way, actually. They were going to attack early in the morning while he was still in bed. Bulli and his wife heard these brothers as they were coming and all of their men, and Bulli knew he was about to fight and probably be killed, so he sends his wife away. The wife objects. She says that she would actually like to stay with her husband and be with him at his last breath, and she promised she wouldn't get in the way of the fight, she would just stand there and watch. And Bulli says no, absolutely not, and he got her away to safety before the fight started. After that, Bulli was killed, and the 4 brothers leave, and his wife actually starts to follow the 4 brothers as they were leaving, and talking to them the whole way, trying to find out which brother it was that dealt the death blow to her husband, so she could initiate the plans for revenge. And they just politely said, told her to leave, and apologizing that things had to come to this. Guys, there are dozens more examples like this all over the sagas, but you get the idea. Any kind of violent altercation, any man made well sure that a woman was clear of the danger before the fighting started. If you get all your historical information from Vikings or Assassin's Creed Valhalla, this shows a very different idea, doesn't it? I don't know why they want to promote all of this crap, but it's actually the opposite of what the historical sources say. I'm not trying to idealize. I definitely don't agree with the woke views on the matter, but there are some more of the conservative people speaking about these things who claim that rape and violence never happened, and that's a lie too. We do have some records of this in the literature, just to give you an idea, and also kind of teach you what this relationship towards rape and violence was. In Grettir's saga, there was a band of berserkers, about 10 to 20 men, who were the most wicked and wanted over all of Norway, and they made their way into the feasting hall of a noble family while the men were away. It was just the women and children there now, and the slaves. So they basically sat themselves down in the hall and ordered the women to start bringing them drinks, bringing them drinking horns. The women did this, but the whole time they were slinging insults at the berserkers, how they could be so animal-like and horrible and rude. And the berserkers says, "Don't worry, my dear lady. Don't worry about your empty beds tonight, for we will be there in place of your husbands." So, if there ever was a polite way to rape someone, there definitely isn't, but if there was the most polite way to do it, this is it in this story. Totally wrong still, never okay. Think about it, the reason I bring up this story is that these were the most wicked men in the country and wanted all over. They were one of the most wicked people that we have in the records of in all the sagas, and they were still pretty polite with the women, relatively. Just compare it to today, for example, or other countries around the world. Do you think that you could leave your women alone with some of the most wicked men in your country and they would be treated this politely? Just saying. It's not right. It just shows that even the most evil men in Viking society had some respect towards women. This mainstream idea of Vikings coming in, lighting the place on fire, and raping and killing the women while their husbands are bleeding out on the ground, this is absolutely a myth. We have zero records of that ever happening. I will say one thing, the slaves were a bit more at risk than the regular free females. In Laxdala Saga, there was a Viking named Hoskul on a trip to Sweden, and he saw an incredibly beautiful slave girl, so he bought her, he purchased her, and he had sex with her. You can consider that rape, of course, that's wrong, but this slave woman was still treated very, very well other than that, and she was given her own land and a place to raise the son and live freely as she wished. Still wrong, but again, this mainstream idea that women were just bought and sold as slaves and passed around as sex slaves and abused, this is absolutely a myth. It has never happened in Scandinavia. So how women were treated was largely dependent on social class. One more example to show you what I mean by this. Take in Olav Tryggvason's saga. The horrible bastard of a king, Olav, went to Sweden because he hoped that the beautiful Swedish princess would marry him. And she said, okay, you're a good king, I'll marry you. But Olav does as he usually did. He tries to force her to adopt the Christian religion. And she says, no, I want to remain pagan, I don't want to. And Olav, in the biggest rage, he gets so mad, he takes off his glove, slaps her in the face with it, and he said, why would I want you, you heathen bitch? And this was an outrage that unleashed an absolute shitstorm all over Scandinavia. Everyone was furious at this, and this was the final straw. Olav had tortured, murdered, and forced Christianization on thousands of people, but the moment he laid a glove on the Swedish princess, this kind of started the events that pushed Scandinavia to come together as a united army to fight off Olav's forces. So class definitely was an important factor. Important note, but still, harming a woman was so incredibly rare, as was rape, and all women were certainly not brought to battle to die alongside the men. If you know any actual stories of this, please write it below in the comments. Don't get me wrong, we have records of women getting feisty. Oh yes, Viking Age women were very tough and they didn't take any shit. They definitely stood up for themselves, and we have some records of them getting violent. I will make a video on that, but every step was taken when the men were going to be fighting. Every step was taken to make sure the women were far away from harm before the violence started. One more thing. There is one single reason that it was acceptable to harm or even kill a woman, and that is if she was a malicious witch. We have quite a few mentions of this in the sagas. If a woman was a bad witch, casting curses, making people ill, killing people, or even helping her brothers in a fight while she was chanting magic from a distance away. All of these malicious uses of magic were brought to swift justice. Stoning to death or burying and drowning was the punishment for an evil witch wreaking havoc on society in this way. But that was the one single case that it was acceptable to harm a woman in the Viking Age. So, hope you enjoyed. Some people are going to get pissed off at all this and they're not going to want to believe it. That's all fine. Feel free to argue. I would love to hear in the comments if you guys can find any stories that somehow show something different than what I spoke about. Leave it in the comments, but please cite your sources. And no, Vikings and the Last Kingdom or anything you see on TV is not a source. So thanks for watching. Much more to come about women and subjects about marriage, land ownership, daily life, laws, lots of things like that, lots of fascinating stuff. So that's all I'll say for today though. Vi ses nästa gång.